At my own granddaughter-in-law's wedding, with music swelling and cameras flashing, she turned her powdered face toward me, smirked and called me a pig. Loud enough for everyone to hear. My hands trembled not from weakness but from rage I buried deep. Because what she and her family did not know was that the man they were laughing with that night, the man who had quietly slipped into the back row, was the very millionaire who had bought her father's crumbling company. And when their worlds collided, everything they built on greed shattered. If you love justice stories, like and subscribe and tell me where you are watching from. My name is Eleanor Mayfield. I am 71 years old, though my bones sometimes feel much older. People say grandmothers should stay quiet, knit blankets and swallow disrespect with a smile. I never agreed with that. My husband passed 10 years ago, leaving me with modest savings, a small cottage on the edge of town, and a stubborn will to live with dignity. My son Daniel is my pride. He married young, built his career as an engineer, and gave me a grandson I adore. But when his wife Clara passed unexpectedly, Daniel remarried within 2 years. That was when Abigail entered our lives. From the start, Abigail had a sharp tongue and a sharper hunger for wealth. She was beautiful in the kind of way magazines praise. Glossy hair, painted nails, a figure that turned heads. But her beauty hid a heart that never softened. She never looked at me as family, only as an obstacle. To her I was a burden in the corner. Someone she wished Daniel would send away. Your mother should not be living here. I overheard her whisper one night when she thought I had gone to bed. It is not proper. People will think we cannot afford help. Daniel defended me at first, but slowly I watched her drip poison into his ears. She made every small thing I did sound like an intrusion. If I folded laundry, she said I was controlling. If I baked bread, she said I was wasting money. If I gave advice, she said I was meddling. But the deepest cut was not her words to me. It was how she raised her voice to my grandson, teaching him that money was the only measure of worth. She dressed him in brands he did not need, scolded him for playing in the dirt, and rolled her eyes when he ran to hug me. Careful, she said. Your grandmother smells like onions. I bore it all. Quietly. Patiently. Because I knew storms burn themselves out. Or so I thought. The wedding was her grand performance. Her family had wealth once, but their empire crumbled in recent years. She wanted to remind the world they were still important. The venue was a hall dripping with chandeliers and gold-trimmed curtains, rented with borrowed money. Every table glittered with crystal glasses, but underneath the glamour, desperation leaked like water from cracked walls. I sat quietly at my table, a pale blue dress covering the arthritis scars on my knees, watching her parade across the floor like a queen. Guests clapped, cameras flashed. Then she looked at me. Her lip curled. There sits the family pig, she announced with a laugh. Still chewing on scraps, I see. Gasps rippled. My grandson's little hand gripped mine, confused. Daniel's face paled, but he said nothing. Not one word. The music seemed to stop. The laughter of the young men around her turned sharp and cruel. And in that moment I felt something colder than shame. I felt resolve. Because what none of them saw was the man at the back of the room. He had come quietly, wearing no tie, no smile, no announcement. His eyes, however, burned with recognition when he saw me. For once, Abigail's father was not the most powerful man in the hall. And soon his pride would break in front of everyone. After that wedding night insult, I thought the worst was already done. But cruelty has a way of digging deeper when it tastes silence. Abigail was not satisfied with mocking me in public. She wanted to erase me from their lives completely. It started small. One morning I found my knitting basket missing from the living room. I searched every corner until I finally discovered it shoved into the garage, covered with dust. I asked her about it. Oh, she said, sipping her coffee, her nails clicking against the porcelain cup. I thought it was clutter. We cannot have guests thinking we live in an old woman's den. Daniel stood nearby, frowning, but when Abigail's eyes slid to him, he lowered his gaze. That silence cut more than her words. Soon my kitchen privileges disappeared. I had cooked for my family my entire life. Soups that healed, breads that filled the house with warmth, roasts that carried us through winters. Abigail told me she had hired a meal service. It is modern, she declared. We cannot live in the past. I watched as boxes arrived each evening, tasteless food served in plastic trays, while the bread I had baked with care was left untouched. My grandson pushed it aside, following his mother's instructions, and my heart broke quietly as the traditions I had tried to pass on crumbled. But the betrayal deepened on a bitter winter night. I was in my room reading an old book when I heard them arguing downstairs. Abigail's voice was sharp, like knives being thrown at walls. "She is a parasite, Daniel. You cannot keep paying for her medicines, her groceries, her little comforts. We are not a charity." Daniel's voice wavered. "She is my mother. I owe her care. You owe your wife loyalty." Abigail snapped. "Do you know what people are saying? That we cannot afford our own life because of her. Your mother drags us down. She is nothing but a pig feeding off scraps." That word again. Pig. I froze, gripping the edge of my blanket, feeling my chest tighten. But worse than the word was Daniel's silence afterward. No defense. No raised voice. Just silence. The next morning the betrayal came to life. I walked into the kitchen, and Abigail handed me an envelope. "This is best for everyone," she said with a sweet smile. Inside was a rental agreement for a small room on the edge of town. Paid for only 3 months. A place so tiny it would barely fit my belongings. "You will be independent there," she said. "Think of it as freedom. You will not have to feel like a burden anymore." Daniel stood behind her, his face pale. He would not meet my eyes. My own son, the boy I had carried in my arms through sickness, the boy I had fed when I had nothing but one potato to boil, could not even speak for me now. I looked at him, hoping, begging with my silence for him to say something. Anything. But his shoulders sagged, and he looked away. My heart cracked in that moment. I folded the paper slowly, placed it back on the counter and said softly, "If that is what you want, then so be it." Abigail smirked, triumphant. "Good. We will help you pack this weekend." But as I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter to steady my shaking hands, a thought burned inside me. This was not just about me being unwanted. No, this was about her greed. She wanted the house, the savings, the control. She wanted me erased so she could rule without resistance. And that was the first time I truly understood. My son had chosen her side. The betrayal was complete. But storms, no matter how violent, often forget the trees that have deep roots. They thought they were pushing me out of their lives. In truth, they were pushing me toward a plan they could never imagine. They believed they had stripped me of everything. What they did not know was that I still held the one secret Abigail's family feared most. The day I moved out, the sky was gray, heavy with clouds that looked like they might burst into snow. Abigail stood in the doorway with her arms folded, directing the movers as though she were a queen sending off an unwanted servant. Daniel carried one box, only one, and then excused himself to take a phone call. I did not stop him. His absence spoke louder than his presence. The little room they found for me smelled of mildew and had a single window facing a brick wall. The carpet was stained, the walls yellowed from years of neglect. Abigail had called it independence. I called it exile. I unpacked my clothes quietly that night, but I did not cry. Instead, I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and whispered to myself, "They think I am done. They think I will fade. But roots run deep, Eleanor. Roots run deep." For weeks I lived simply. I stretched my savings, ate little and kept to myself. Yet each Sunday I dressed neatly and went to church. It was there, among hymns and whispers of prayer, that I first saw him again, the quiet man from the wedding. He did not approach me at first, but I caught his eyes studying me from across the pews. Sharp, calculating eyes, yet softened by something, perhaps guilt. The next betrayal struck on a cold evening in February. I had just returned from church when I received a letter. Not handwritten, not even addressed with care. It was a typed notice. Daniel and Abigail had refinanced the house, using it as collateral for a loan. My name had been removed from the property records entirely. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. My husband and I had bought that house with sweat and sacrifice, one paycheck at a time. It was the roof under which Daniel took his first steps, where Clara had painted the nursery yellow, where I had buried jars of pickles in the cellar to feed us through lean winters. And now, with the stroke of a pen, I was erased. Abigail had won another battle. That night the anger sat heavy in my chest, so sharp it kept me awake. And in the silence I began to stitch together a plan. Abigail believed she controlled everything. But I knew something her family had prayed no one would discover. Her father's empire was gone. Yes, The Mayfields had dined at their table once years ago. He had boasted about his business, about his unshakable company, about the millions he would leave his children. But I had seen the newspaper articles that came later. Quiet sales, lawsuits, a desperate scramble to stay afloat. And then silence. The company had been sold in its entirety. To whom? That had been the whisper no one confirmed. Until that wedding day when I saw the quiet man in the back row. His name was Victor Stanton, a self-made millionaire. And I remembered the headline. Victor Stanton acquires Mayfield Industries in full buyout. Abigail's father had lost everything. And the man she had sneered at in the back row held all the cards. But my revenge required patience. In March, Daniel visited me for the first time. He looked tired, his face hollowed by stress. He brought me groceries, but when I asked him how the family was, his shoulders slumped. Things are difficult, he admitted. The loan, the payments. Abigail says it is temporary, but... I stopped him with a look. Son, money is not temporary. Debt clings harder than love. He flinched, but he did not argue. That night, I sat by the window of my small room. The glow of the street lamp painting shadows on the wall. I thought of Abigail's smirk, her voice calling me a pig, her hands signing away the house. And I thought of Victor Stanton's eyes watching, waiting. Every betrayal added a layer, each one pressing on me like stones. But stones also build walls. And behind my wall of silence, I was building something she could not see. She thought the house was hers. She thought my silence was surrender. But I was already moving pieces she would never understand, and soon the ground beneath her would crack. The following months became a chessboard. Abigail thought she had cleared the board of my pieces, but she forgot one thing. A grandmother's patience is her greatest weapon. I watched, I listened, and I waited for the right move. Every Sunday at church, Victor Stanton sat in the same pew. We began with small nods, then polite greetings. One morning after service he approached me. Mrs. Mayfield, he said, his voice low. I saw what happened at that wedding. I do not forget disrespect. I studied his face. Stern lines, yet a softness in his eyes when he spoke. You bought Mayfield Industries, I said. He inclined his head. Yes. And I have been watching their desperation ever since. My heart pounded, not with fear but with recognition. Here was a man who had been underestimated just like me. Over the next weeks we spoke more. He told me of the debts the Mayfields still owed, of the quiet humiliation her father endured behind closed doors. And I told him what Abigail had done, the eviction, the insults, the erasure. His jaw tightened as he listened. One day, he said, the truth will burn through her lies. And when it does, you should be there to watch. That sentence planted a seed. Meanwhile, Abigail's greed escalated. She flaunted her life online with pictures of vacations they could not afford. Handbags worth more than a month's mortgage. My grandson wore designer shoes that pinched his little toes, but she paraded them as proof of wealth. Their debt grew like a shadow, stretching further each month. Daniel visited less. When he did, he was thinner, more worn. One night, he confessed quietly, Mother, I signed papers I should not have. Abigail insisted. Now I cannot see a way out. I held his hands, his skin clammy with fear. There is always a way out, Daniel. But it will not come from her. He stared at me, uncertain. That night I wrote in my journal, not sorrow, not despair, but a plan. Step by step, I listed everything I knew about Abigail's family. The bankruptcy, the secret sale, the lies they maintained to keep their social image. And then I wrote one line under it all. Truth is the knife that cuts arrogance at its root. Spring came, and with it another betrayal. This time aimed not at me, but at my grandson. He had drawn a picture at school of our old house, with me baking bread in the kitchen. Abigail found it in his backpack. She tore it in half. You live in this house now, she hissed. That old woman does not belong in our lives anymore. When I heard about it from him, his small voice shaking as he told me at the park where I met him in secret, I felt fire rise inside me. No longer was this about my dignity alone. It was about protecting the innocent she was trying to poison. So I began to prepare in earnest. I collected newspaper clippings, copies of business filings, even quiet whispers from neighbors who had once worked for the Mayfields. I built a small folder of evidence, each page a nail in the coffin of their reputation. One evening as the sun dipped behind the church, Victor walked me to my car. "You are gathering proof," he said, his eyes sharp. "Yes," I replied. "She believes she can bury me. But she forgets, even ashes fertilize the soil." He smiled a rare genuine smile. "When the time comes I will stand with you." The trap was not yet sprung, but every piece was in place. All I needed was the moment when pride would drive Abigail to the edge. Because that was when the ground would give way beneath her feet. The chance came sooner than I expected. Summer brought with it the grandest illusion Abigail had ever staged. Her vow renewal ceremony, only a year after the wedding. She claimed it was to celebrate love, but everyone knew it was to parade wealth they did not possess. Invitations were sent on thick paper embossed with gold leaf, boasting of a weekend retreat at an estate her father rented to impress his old business partners. When Daniel brought me the invitation, his hands trembled. "Mother," he said softly, "Abigail insisted. She says it would be rude not to invite you." I looked at him. "Do you want me there, Daniel?" He swallowed hard. "I want peace." Peace. A word that sounded hollow when spoken by a man chained by fear. But I nodded anyway. "Then I will come." In truth, I had already decided. This was the stage where truth would burn through lies. I polished my old pearls, pressed my best navy dress, and walked into that estate with my head high. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, tables sagged beneath catered dishes, and Abigail glided across the room in a gown worth more than my yearly pension. Guests whispered about her elegance, her family's resurgence, her father's rumored new business deals. But I noticed the details others ignored. The sweat beading on her father's brow, the nervous way he clutched his glass, the forced laughter that broke too quickly. And in the corner, silent but watchful, stood Victor Stanton. When our eyes met, he gave the smallest nod. The moment was near. The ceremony began with music and flowery speeches. Abigail took the microphone, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Today we prove," she announced, "that love and family stand above everything else. No matter what challenges come, the Mayfield name endures." Applause filled the hall. Cameras flashed. She basked in it, certain she had won. But truth waits for its cue. Halfway through the evening, her father raised a toast. His words stumbled, his hands shook. Then the whispers began. One guest, emboldened by wine, leaned toward another. "I heard Stanton owns everything now. The Mayfields have nothing." Another chuckled. "Smoke and mirrors, that is all this is." The rumor spread like fire on dry grass. Abigail's smile stiffened. Her eyes darted nervously toward her father. And that was when Victor stepped forward, his voice clear, calm and undeniable. "Yes," he said, "it is true. I bought Mayfield Industries. Every building, every patent, every asset. The company no longer belongs to this family. It belongs to me." The hall went silent. The chandelier light glinted off his glasses as he looked directly at Abigail's father. "And tonight, I think it is time everyone here knew the truth." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Abigail's father swayed, pale as chalk. Abigail herself clutched Daniel's arm, her painted nails digging into his sleeve. "He is lying," she shrieked. "Do not listen to him." But the weight of Victor's words crushed her denial. Guests began murmuring, shifting uncomfortably, looking at the family they once envied with new eyes. And I, sitting quietly at my table, placed my hands in my lap and felt a calm I had not known in years. Because the stage was set. The lies were unraveling. And I was about to deliver the final blow. The world now knew the Mayfields were bankrupt pretenders. But they still had one mask left to hide behind. And I was the only one who could tear it off. The silence after Victor's declaration was heavier than stone. You could hear the clink of a single fork dropped by a startled guest. Abigail's father tried to rise, glass trembling in his hand, but his words stuttered out like a failing engine. "This is a misunderstanding. We still have influence." Victor cut him off. "Influence without money is a shadow without substance." His tone was calm, almost surgical. "And tonight, everyone here sees what your family has been hiding." Murmurs swirled. Old associates who once sought his favor turned their backs. The chandeliers no longer felt like crowns above their heads, but spotlights exposing their shame. Abigail's face twisted. She grabbed the microphone from her father. "Enough. This is slander. We are Mayfields. We will not be humiliated by some outsider. Her eyes darted toward me, venom sharp. And I know who is behind this. It is her. The pig in the corner. She is poisoning our family with lies. Every eye turned to me. I rose slowly, my knees aching but my back straight. I walked to the center of the hall, where the glittering floor reflected every trembling step. You call me pig, I said, my voice steady. But pigs are clever. They root out what others bury. Gasps echoed. Some guests chuckled nervously. Abigail sneered. Do not try to turn this into some performance. You are nothing. You were always nothing. Daniel only kept you around out of pity. My son's face went pale. He opened his mouth but no sound came out. He looked like a man drowning, unable to reach the surface. So I spoke for both of us. You took my home, I continued, pulling a folder from my bag. You stripped my name from the property records. You called me parasite. But you forget, paper speaks louder than painted lies. I held up copies of their refinancing documents, the loans signed under Daniel's name. You drove my son into debt. You poisoned his judgment. And for what? For a dress, a handbag, a performance on this stage. The crowd shifted, whispers growing louder. Abigail's mask began to crack. You have no right, she hissed. You should have stayed hidden in your little hole. And yet here I stand, I replied, my voice rising with a power I did not know I still had. I raised Daniel when your father was still squandering fortunes in boardrooms. I built a home when your mother was ordering servants to polish silver. And when you called me a pig before, I stayed silent. But tonight, Abigail, silence ends. I placed the folder on the table before the guests, each page a weapon. Business filings, newspaper clippings, even testimony from neighbors who remembered workers left unpaid when Mayfield Industries collapsed. Victor stepped closer, his voice like steel. Mrs. Mayfield speaks the truth. Every word, every document here is verified. This family has nothing left. Their wealth is a costume, and tonight that costume is torn. The hall erupted. Some guests stormed out, disgusted. Others laughed bitterly, mocking the family they once envied. Abigail's father slumped into his chair, a broken man, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering across the floor. But Abigail was not done. Her fury flared, desperate and wild. She clutched Daniel's arm, digging her nails deep. Do something, she screamed. Defend me. Defend our name. Daniel stood frozen, torn between loyalty and shame. His lips parted, but again no words came. I stepped toward him, my voice softer now but cutting through the chaos. Son, look around you. Look at what she has made of you. This is not loyalty. This is chains. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in years I saw the boy I once knew. The boy who used to run into my arms after school. The boy who believed in kindness more than wealth. His lips trembled. Mother, Abigail shrieked, shaking him. Do not listen to her. She is manipulating you. She is jealous. The crowd fell silent again, waiting. Even Victor seemed to hold his breath. Daniel pulled his arm free. Slowly, firmly. His voice cracked, but it carried through the hall. No, Abigail. Mother is right. Gasps. Abigail's face drained of color. She staggered back as if struck. I let you twist me, Daniel continued, tears brimming in his eyes. I let you turn me against the woman who gave me everything. But no more. I will not stand here and pretend we are something we are not. The hall roared with whispers, shock, applause, even pity. Abigail's father buried his face in his hands. Abigail herself stood shaking, her mascara streaking down her face, her hands clenched into trembling fists. You will regret this, she hissed at me, her voice shaking with fury. You think you are clever, but you are nothing but a withered old witch. I met her glare without blinking. Better a witch with wisdom than a fool with borrowed jewels. Abigail had been exposed, her father humiliated, Daniel shaken free of her grasp. But I knew she was not finished. A cornered snake always strikes hardest, and her venom was still to come. Abigail's shrill words echoed through the glittering hall, but I did not flinch. Years of swallowing pain had hardened me for this moment. She stood trembling, mascara running like ink down cracked porcelain. Her expensive gown suddenly nothing but fabric without meaning. The guests, restless and curious, waited for the final stroke. They wanted blood and she knew it. Her eyes darted to Daniel. You cannot betray me like this, she hissed, grabbing his sleeve again. Think of our son, think of our life. Without me, you are nothing. Daniel shook his head, tears streaming. No. Without you I am free. Her gasp sliced through the air. She staggered back, but still her venom poured. You all think she is some saint, some victim. She pointed at me, finger shaking. But she is a manipulator. She is weak. She lives off pity. That is all she has ever done. I stepped forward, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. You mistake survival for weakness. And you mistake silence for defeat. But tonight, Abigail, your lies die in the open. I opened the last page of my folder, a letter. Not from me, but from one of her father's former employees. A man who had lost his pension when Mayfield Industries collapsed, while her family hid behind silk curtains. His words spilled across the paper. They left us with nothing. They called it business, but it was theft. I read it aloud, each word striking harder than my voice ever could. The crowd erupted with anger. Some shouted. Some cursed the Mayfield's name. Abigail's father tried to rise in protest but collapsed back into his chair, broken by truth. Then Victor Stanton spoke again, stepping beside me like a judge delivering sentence. Every empire of lies collapses when light shines upon it. Tonight that light is here. And I will make it clear. The Mayfields no longer hold a shred of power. Their debts outweigh their assets. Their wealth is gone. What remains is arrogance, and arrogance alone. The hall erupted into applause, laughter, even mocking jeers at Abigail and her father. She spun in circles, eyes wild, searching for someone, anyone to defend her. But none came. Even her closest friends edged away, not wanting the stain of her downfall to touch them. And then came the moment that sealed her fate. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steadier than before. Abigail, our marriage, it is over. I will not let my mother suffer another day under your cruelty. I will fight for custody of our son, and I will not let him grow up poisoned by greed. The hall gasped. Abigail let out a scream. Raw, furious, desperate. You cannot leave me. You owe me everything. No, Daniel said softly. I owe my mother everything. And I owe my son the truth. Abigail lunged at me then, her hands clawed like talons. But Victor caught her by the arm, holding her fast. Do not shame yourself further, he said coldly. You are already finished. Security escorted her out, her screams echoing through the corridors of the grand estate. Guests whispered, some pitying, some gleeful at the spectacle. Her father, pale and broken, remained slumped in his chair, staring into nothingness. When the doors closed behind her, the hall seemed to exhale. Daniel fell to his knees before me. Mother, I am so sorry. I was blind. I let her use me. I let her hurt you. I bent down, lifting his chin. Son, blindness can be cured when truth opens the eyes. Tonight you have seen. That is enough. Tears streamed freely down his cheeks. He clutched my hands as though they were lifelines. Guests looked on, many with admiration, some with shame for ever believing Abigail's lies. Victor leaned toward me, his voice low. You planned this well. Justice has been served. I shook my head. Justice is never served by one person. It is served when truth refuses to stay buried. Abigail was dragged out, her power stripped, her mask shattered. But the story did not end there. The wreckage she left behind still had to be rebuilt. And the scars she carved into my family needed healing. The estate emptied slowly that night, guests leaving in clusters, their whispers trailing like smoke. Some offered me quiet nods of respect, others stopped to press my hand. A few murmured words I never thought I would hear again. Strength, dignity, justice. But when the chandeliers dimmed and the laughter of the crowd faded, it was just my family left in the great hall, fractured, trembling but free. Daniel sat beside me, his hands still shaking. My grandson curled into my lap, his little face buried against my chest. For the first time in months, he did not flinch when I kissed his hair. He whispered, Grandma, can we go home? Those words pierced me, because what was home anymore? Abigail had sold pieces of it for handbags and illusions. But perhaps home was not walls or carpets. Perhaps home was the bond that could be mended when truth stripped everything else away. Daniel wiped his eyes and looked at me. Mother, I do not deserve forgiveness. I let her poison my heart. I let her call you names, push you out, Erase everything you and father built. I held his face in my hands, the same face I once kissed goodnight under quilts I had sewn. Son, forgiveness is not earned with perfection. It is given when love is still alive. And my love for you never left. His shoulders crumbled. He wept into my lap like a boy again, and I let him. Years of silence poured out of him in tears, and I felt my own heart unclench at last. Victor approached quietly, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor. It is finished, he said, his tone grave. The Mayfields will not recover from this. Their debts will drown them. I nodded. But families cannot live on revenge alone. Tonight I won my dignity back, but tomorrow I must rebuild what matters most. He studied me for a long moment, then inclined his head. Wisdom speaks louder than power. You reminded me of that. And with that, he left us to our healing. The weeks that followed were not easy. Abigail fought like a cornered wolf in court, her screams echoing through hearings as she tried to cling to her image. But truth does not bend to fury. Daniel's lawyer, armed with evidence of her manipulations and debts, secured custody. Abigail's influence collapsed along with her illusions. She vanished from our lives like smoke in the wind. Daniel and my grandson moved back into my little cottage. It was not large, it was not grand, but it was ours. I baked bread again, filling the rooms with warmth. My grandson laughed freely now, his drawings once more filled with sunshine and gardens instead of broken houses. And Daniel, he worked hard not to rebuild riches but to rebuild trust. Each evening he sat at the table with me, no screens, no distractions, just conversation. Sometimes we talked of memories. Sometimes we sat in silence. But the silence was no longer heavy, it was healing. One evening as we watched the fire crackle, Daniel said, "Mother, I thought strength meant money. I thought love meant appearances. But you showed me the truth. Strength is standing firm even when the world mocks you. Love is forgiving even when it hurts." I smiled softly. And wisdom, Daniel, is knowing when to fight and when to wait. Abigail thought my silence was surrender. She never understood that silence can be the sharpest weapon. He nodded, his eyes glistening. And so the story ends not with riches or revenge, but with roots restored. They tried to bury me under insult, betrayal, and exile. But roots when deep break through stone. Abigail's cruelty burned away. Her family's empire crumbled, but my dignity endured. My son returned, my grandson was free. And our home was rebuilt not from wealth but from truth. They thought I was weak, but wisdom never fades. Now I ask you, dear listener, what lesson do you take from this story?
Comment Bilo